what we're going to cover is I'm going to explain cybersecurity in terms you can understand. I want to talk about why this has become an identity crisis for you in your role in everything you're doing with technology. I want to talk about that threat landscape that you're up against, and then we'll talk about some best practices, and then we'll have a Q&A. So I'm going to ask you a couple questions throughout the session, but I'd also love your engagement throughout the chat as well. So what I want to start with is if I could get your input, so I know my audience here, what is your role at your company? It will help me know how to direct where I go with this, because cybersecurity is so vast. There's so many different pillars around it, and there's so many areas to deep dive. I want to be able to cover aspects that are really impactful to you and not necessarily go off on a tangent that's not necessarily relevant to you. So please do tell me what your role is. Give you a couple minutes to answer that question. And again, you're going to be confidential. This is not necessarily going to be shared, and just your generic title is fine with me. I don't need to know the company name per se.
Okay, I got some answers coming in. So we have bank operations, supervisor, executive assistant, manager, assistant. We have human resources, employment specialist, bank operations, accountant, administrative assistant, resource coordinator, program manager. I might be missing a few, but I think that's the gist there.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate this and appreciate your engagement. So I'm going to cover a couple things for you just to get us on the same page. First of all, we need to know who these hackers are. You're here today because you want to learn a little bit more about what's happening out there and how it's impacting your role. However, what you don't understand is actually who these hackers really are.
She found me on the backup.
Could you mute everyone, Matt? So we need to understand that there really is hackers out there, and they're really actually targeting all North American businesses. I would liken them to like El Chapo. It's an organized crime organization. It's a syndicate that runs on sophisticated network of connections and tools to be able to utilize to target vulnerabilities in organizations and people like you. So you can imagine that they're using all their resources, and they have endless amount of money, and they have all the people that they could ever use to be able to exercise and infiltrate an organization, doesn't matter which size. So we call these gangs ransomware gangs. We call them nation state hackers. We call them cyber criminals. Doesn't matter what you call them, they're organized. And they are very sophisticated, and they're actually all over the world. So we can say Russia, we can say China, we can say Turkey, but at the end of the day, they're all over the world, and sometimes they're even in our own country. So what we have to understand is they don't have a face. I have a face here where I show you Dimitri. He's part of a ransomware gang that was somewhat dismantled last year. And his name is Dimitri. He was caught by the Interpol, FBI, kind of an integrated system of organized governments, entities that came together to track him down and find him. But at the end of the day, this is a face that you would usually never see. You would never have a face behind a hacker. So that's the problem, is they're not found, they're not caught, but they come and they basically disguise themselves so that you don't know who they are. And they're pretending to be somebody they're not, and they're targeting you. So these fraudsters, cyber criminals, they exploit our trust, our technology, our emotions, and they craft scams that evolve faster than any people or organization can even keep up with. We have elaborate government systems out there trying to target them. We have our software companies trying to protect our companies. We have people trying to protect your companies. And yet that's still not necessarily enough, because these criminals are continually evolving their tactics as well. And so that's why it's really great that you're here, because unfortunately, it's important for you to understand, what are they actually targeting besides you? Well, they want your data. That's their main objective. And so they're looking at how can they get confidential data. So cybersecurity is really crucial to everyday part of your business because you're handling confidential data every day. Whether you realize it or not, what I find is a lot of people aren't sure that they are. And then they're not sure how are they handling it properly, right? So it's important to understand confidential data is called a term that we like to use. So it's part of confidential data is PII, personally identifiable information. Now that includes, addresses, names, health records, financial records, employment records, HR records, tax records, online usernames, credentials, anything that's going to identify you as who you are. So we'll say, who's Eric? Well, how do you define yourself, Erica? Who are you? How would I know you are Eric, right? You have all these ways of identifying you. Well, that is considered confidential information. Now, I work with large companies, and one of them, I work with all sorts of AppSec developers. And they will go to their privacy officer and they'll ask them this question. What is considered personally identifiable information? How am I sure that I'm handling it properly? So it's really important for you to understand that you know what data you're touching that is actually considered confidential in the eyes of the law, Canadian law. And it's important for you to know that because that's what you can do differently in your day-to-day workflow is knowing what you're handling, then you will handle it differently because this is the data that these hackers are trying to gain access to. So they're basically hunting any way they can have to be able to access that data and then sell it. That's their main objective. So you are touching it every day. You are saving it, you're transmitting it, you're accessing it, and you may not realize you are doing that every single day, but that is what you have your hands on, and that's what they want to be able to retrieve from you through unauthorized means so they can take it and steal it. So they're ferocious when it comes to this. They will not stop. They're relentless. They don't work 9 to 5. They don't have legitimate licenses, and they have very big motivators because it always will gain them money. Lots and lots and lots of money. So my next question to you is, if you could put in this question, what confidential data do you handle every day? Again, this is really interesting to know, to see how much, is it all day that you handle confidential data? Sometimes it's really not so obvious what you're handling for confidential data. So please think about it for a moment and just input.
So the answers are coming in. We have client information and records, personal information, employee data, client info, again, employer information, a lot of employer information, health information, payroll contracts or contact and location, client records.
Excellent.
Project information, supplier information and records. Yeah.
Excellent. So those are all very, very valuable pieces of data that you're handling every day. And it may not be super obvious to you as you're talking about, I handle supplier info. When you look at it, what Kathleen says, login stuff and vendor account access info. Yeah, it is incredibly valuable. And the reason it's valuable because when you can look at it and go, if we were to lose access to this data today, and it was to be taken from us and used for nefarious reasons, to be resold or to be extorted, would this cause our organization harm? Would it impact our services? Would it impact our day-to-day work? Would it impact our clients? Would it impact our staff? So when you start realizing yes to all of them, you realize you're handling something that's extremely valuable to these expert hackers. So this is what leads us to talk about the identity crisis, because you are the access point to that data. You are handling that directly. Whether you're doing it with 2 other team members or yourself, you are still handling it directly. And not only that, you may be the gateway to be handling that data. So you may not handle that, confidential client information, but maybe you are on the same team and the access to that is somewhat the same. So you have to understand the gateway is to the data. You are the gateway. So when we look at that, that means who are you and how do you have permission to access payroll contracts, client information, the health information? How do you have access? Well, you've been given access permission, you've been given credentials, you've been given kind of somewhat trust within your organization because of obviously your capabilities, but that's your role. So when you look at all of that data that you're handling every day, whether whomever you're doing it with and whoever you're sharing it with, it is you that is handling it and is responsible for it. Now, these criminals are fully aware of that. They are doing enough reconnaissance in the marketplace to know, and they're very aware of our technology, our methods of doing business, and they also know what works psychologically to get to you. Now, I want you to put on a few hats today as well. I want you to put on that personal hat because you're all obviously working with devices, software, and online services personally with your family, yourself, and then professionally, you're handling all online services, software, cloud access, and personal information on both fronts. Okay, confidential information on both fronts. So I'll tell you, there's really no perimeter around the areas in which you're trying to protect yourself. It is one and the same, professional and personal. So please put on both lenses here when you look at this, because this impacts everything you do every day. So I would tell you honestly, every day you're going to get conned. 82% of cyber incidences are caused by uninformed employees, but they're also uninformed people personally. Whether the devices you're using, you are being targeted every day, but targeted in a way to con you. So cyber criminals are sophisticated in their expertise in using software tools, but then they're experts in using those tools to maneuver to get you to be tricked. So that doesn't matter which way it's coming at you. Right? They're very sophisticated. We call them high quality spear phishing tactics because they're directed at you personally or professionally to get inroads into data. So we know phishing is here to stay. They're going to send you malicious links. They're going to send you various different types of texts. They're going to contact you through all sorts of social media. They're going to make phone calls. They're going to send emails, and they're going to have attachments. They're going to come at you every different way to be able to see if you can be tricked and not know it's fake. So you're not going to even know how to know it's not real. I've dealt with clients that have worked for big organizations and they had an employee phishing scam happen to them. And when they showed me all the documentation, all of it looked real. Hiring package was real. The name of the HR manager doing the recruiting was real, and all of it was fake. Every last bit of it was fake. Now that company had enough wherewithal to realize that there was a couple questions that was asked within that LinkedIn communication that made the staff member go, pause, something's happening here, because it was not their process in the way they followed hiring a new staff member. And so they were like, what's happening right now? Why am I receiving questions about this possible job posting, which was a legitimate job posting, but they were coming at it from two different angles. One was, hey, I'm applying for this job. This is what they've sent me. Can you help me? Because I'm not getting the answers I need. And I want some help, and you work at this company. And then they were sending them attachments. They were showing them the communication channels with fake HR bosses, but it was actually the HR boss that worked for that company. So it was so sophisticated, and it took that one staff member just a moment to pause to go, that's not how we hire people. Why would he be sending that to me over LinkedIn when I'm not even in hiring? So he was able to report it, and they were able to stop it right in its tracks, and then bring a complete awareness around it so that everyone knew, like, we have someone hijacked our website, hijacked our personnel, and basically stole that person's identity to be able to create a LinkedIn profile, and then was running a whole job scam campaign. So no one was prepared for this, and yet here it was happening right before their own eyes, and it was so sophisticated, and it was coming at different angles. So you need to know it's here to stay. It's not going away, and it's just a matter of catching you when you least expect it, and it's going to come at every single possible angle. And we call it crime as a service. And they have all sorts of different crimes as service. So here's a few examples. Now, this is changing all the time, so I'm giving you this as of today, but I can promise you they're like this chess game. They're just going to continually move it, whack-a-mole, whatever you want to call it. They're going to continually change this so that they can stay abreast of how they can trick us to be able to gain access to our systems, to steal access from you, your data, and sell it for money. So as you see, I have here is phishing as a service. It's legitimately a crime as a service, which is phishing. Scamming as a service, scanning as a service, spamming as a service, malware as a service. So you don't have to know all these terms, but you just need to know in all of our professional services, like as a cybersecurity professional, this is what we know. And I'm in this every day. And I don't know how one who works in any sector could be on top of this, because I can barely stay on top of it. But what I'm here to tell you is you have to understand they're continually evolving, and they're making a lot of money to be able to create these services, to be able to target you in different ways. And you know it. You've been getting phone calls from visa companies telling you have an overcharged account that may be fraudulent. Well, you don't have a Visa account, so you know it's not real. You are getting emails telling you to reset your passwords. It's endless, right? So stolen or compromised credentials, like that's the number 2 cause in the way that these cyber criminals are being able to access your accounts. They're stealing them from you, right? They're finding a way to steal them from you, or they're buying them from the dark web market to be able to reuse them. So that threat landscape is really, really prolific. 75% of targeted attacks begin with phishing emails. So that means every day you're going to get bombarded. Now, Smart Dolphins is an IT technology company that works with email filtering and helps you with business email compromise, can only do so much, because they're always circumventing and trying to find new ways to get past these firewalls and these systems to filter your email. So what that means is even if 10% get through email, that means they're coming to you directly. So then how are you going to recognize them, right? So you have to be better at recognizing all of these incoming scams meant for harm, because the systems can only do so much. So it's a bit of a tall order, I know, because then if we have AI coming in and the software is not working, how are we going to be adept at that? I understand it's really daunting. But over the last 12 months, it is really continually increasing. And so we have no choice but to be diligent and aware. 42% of these cyber incidences have been reported in 2024. 94% of those faced was small and medium businesses attacks. They were up 73% from 2023. So we do know it's rising. There's too many ransomware gangs to begin with. There's over 100 right now. 100. So they all have different targets and different goals, whether they hit a small business, whether they hit healthcare, whether they hit lawyers, whether they hit academia. They all have their specializations, and then they target them. But you can see that the global reach in 2024 hit 4.8 million. And I mean, who wants to give away money to these criminals? Nobody. However, the way that they're operating is leaving these businesses with no choices, small businesses like yours as well, because they're stealing the data, encrypting the data, and not giving it back to the organization until they pay money. So they're under this kidnapping of data negotiation that they can't win, right? So there's incredible losses and organizations go out of business. 23andMe had a ransomware attack a couple years ago. And if you had ever used 23andMe, which is a genetic data organization, they lost a lot of data through that cyber breach, and they are now closing their doors. They couldn't handle the loss. They couldn't handle the reputational harm. So if you use them, you would have received notification that they're like, please delete your data now, because once they're out of business, that data is now kind of out for, not protected. And that's scary because you thought you gave your confidential data to a company like that, only to find out, okay, they got a cyber breach, got sold to the dark web, but now they're going out of business and you have to delete that data now before they go out of business because it's not protected either. So we have to look at where are our rights? How are we protecting ourselves, right? So we have to talk about different ways in which this needs to happen daily, right? And we know the average employee reuses their passwords 13 times. So hackers are banking on that. They just know that. So once they steal your credentials through the dark web, they buy them, they can just have a heyday. They can find all sorts of software you're logged into, and then they, in turn, get to steal your identity and then pretend they're you and log into systems that are only meant for you and pretend they're you. So password security is critical in your day-to-day workflow, right? So you have to have a password policy for your organization. You have to use a password manager because you have to manage your credentials differently. And it is hard to manage passwords. I understand that. However, knowing that that is where you are most vulnerable, we have to take a little bit more accountability to take efforts to stop them in their tracks. And this is one way. And then AI. I mean, everyone's terrified of AI right now. I mean, I'm having fun with it. I mean, I don't know how many of you use generative AI, but it's fun. But the concept of deep fake is pretty alarming because it now can clone voices. Not now, you know what I'm saying? It is able to clone voices. This is not new. And it is able to create correspondence that looks real, create logos that are real, create anything that looks real. So now you're up against the fact that you actually can't determine a fake logo. You can't determine a fake voice. They're going to be able to steal anything they want. That is, they can scrape from the web and then they can just recreate that to be you, because they have enough information about Marina online where they can just scrape it, put it together, and then they can pretend they're Marina. So we are up against a massive identity crisis, and we have to look at what we can do to protect ourselves differently. And there's an endless amount of breaches I can give you examples to. First Nations, Toronto Public Library, Power School. So if you don't mind, why don't you help me look up one of them and tell me what happened at First Nations Health Authority? What was stolen during that cyber incident? So I'll give you a minute to look it up. And if you could find it, what was stolen out of the data, and put it in the chat box. These are just a few of the breaches. Obviously, I can't even list them all. This is just in Canada alone. Breaches are happening every day, and they're happening to every type of company. These are just a couple examples where they're kind of, in your backyard. So once you find what was stolen from First Nations Health Authority, please put it in the chat box. This will help you also understand what you're up against. All right, so I have some information that just came in. Excellent. Okay, perfect. So one of the reasons I asked you to look it up is because I want you to be able to know what you're looking at. I want you to know what you're looking for. And I want to help you understand how to break this down so you can understand how this is like impactful to you with your team and your organization as a whole. So as you can see, if you would go to the chat box, you'll see some of the answers, and you will see an incredible amount of confidential data was retrieved from an unauthorized user and taken from that organization. As you can see, as what you had all said to me at the beginning, the information you handle every day, you will see, that's some of the data I handle every day. Health insurance, personal health numbers, demographic information, all sorts of personal information, test results, insurance claims. So as you can see, the list is pretty extensive. And so what I want you to be aware of is a couple things around these type of breaches. One is they are public. That means there's massive reputational harm. Clients are massively vulnerable now to whatever these ransomware gangs are going to do to that with that data. For on the front end, because it's now public, but two, because it's now been their private information has been taken away from them and is now no longer private. So what have they done as an organization? How are they now liable, right? And then these ransomware gangs, they are able to take that and extort that organization to do whatever they want. Because there's two reasons they're going to be extorted. One is they may have that data backed up and it may be protected and safe to be able to operate business again. But when you look at a ransomware attack like London Drugs, their data was kidnapped, and because London Drugs wasn't totally sure how they infiltrated their systems, they had to shut down for 10 days. And that meant 80 stores were down. So could you be shut down for a day? How about you didn't have to go to work tomorrow because you couldn't access systems? How about day two? Couldn't access systems, couldn't access any client information. And then you hear from your leader that like all systems have been breached. So no business today, no business tomorrow, no business day three. And that is where an organization is at the mercy. They're now at the mercy of a criminal determining how they do business. And London Drugs had to be down for 10 days and didn't know what these criminals stole. Now they know what criminals stole from London Drugs, and now they're trying to figure out how to clean up that mess. They didn't pay the criminals because they couldn't pay the criminals. The criminals were asking for $25 million. Do you have $25 million to pay out to a criminal who has no face and no name and just wants your money because they have your data and they're exploiting you? So when you look at this cat and mouse game, it looks pretty vicious because they're the winners and you're not. You could be out of business because they're going to take everything from you. That is what's happening to you as an employee because they're targeting you to be able to do that. London Drugs, a breach started with one point of access. Now, how they are going to reveal that, we're going to find out through liability, through a lawsuit, because it was such a large breach. But we won't know. This is going to go on for years. So when you look at this as from a lens going, your personal information is no longer protected. What are you going to do about that? Your client's information is no longer protected. What are you going to do about that? You're at the mercy of criminals. So we want to talk about the fact that you have to do things differently now. You have to be accountable differently, and you have to operate work differently, because that's what you're up against, is these criminals that are heartless and have no face. They have no name and they won't be caught. So these ransomware attacks that I just showed you, they're not being caught. They just got away with everything that they wanted to do, and they're untraceable. Can you believe that? They're untraceable. So we have to talk about how to protect your identity, because it's going to start with you in your own organization first, so that you're not a target and you're not vulnerable to these tactics, right? So you have to become that firewall, that human firewall, to say, okay, we will have all the software that will be there in place, but we have to also take our due diligence and follow the best practices every day, so that we can act accordingly and keep these criminals at bay. They'll never have a face. I promise you, they'll never have a face. They'll never have a name. I can tell you FBI discloses capture of these gangs, capture of their systems, capture of their extortion sites, capture of their dark web marketplace sites. But it's just, there's so many of them. There's thousands of dark web marketplace vendors, and there's hundreds of actors inside of these ransomware gangs. There's 100 gangs, but numerous actors inside of each gang. So you can see it's quite prolific. So what can you do as an employee? Well, first of all, think about how you communicate. Do you believe all communication you get is real? I would tell you, starting from today, you should start believing it's not real. I would tell you, no longer trust. I would say, using your secure apps, and let's not talk about Signal right now, because it's not. Your IM on social media, not secure. You're going to get fake communication day in, day out. How about, what are your communication processes in your organization? I mean, this whole Signal debacle showed you they just added one person to their Signal communication and all blew up. It was no longer confidential. So you have to look at, when you're communicating as a team, how you're communicating confidentially, because you need to protect that too. But then you also need to know who's incoming, who's communicating with you. Don't trust every communication coming your way just because it comes on your phone, just because it comes on your Snapchat, your WhatsApp account, because that doesn't mean it's real. Imagine it could be compromised, and it's you have to know it could be compromised. We have to manage passwords. They matter. You have to manage them differently. We have no choice. We can't reuse them. We can't be lackadaisy about them. So using a password manager is critical. Which one do you use? Ask your leaders. Which one do you use? Which one should you use? Which one is user-friendly? There's amazing ones out there, and they are user-friendly. They create passwords for you. They check the dark web if it's been a compromised password. They store them in a vault so they're protected and encrypted. And then they can create them for you so that you just pop up, and they use it based on your login credentials so that you can sign on, and with like seamless effort. You're not necessarily memorizing another password except for maybe a master password, so that you don't have to write it down on paper. You don't have to keep it in an Excel spreadsheet. You don't have to keep it in your notes in your email. The list goes on. None of those ways are secure. We're not in a pen and paper world anymore. We're in a digital age. So we have to change with the digital age. And then multi-factor authentication is critical. We can't enter a system without it. That is one other layer where it verifies it's you, so that you're not having a lockbit ransomware gang threat actor go, okay, well, I want to get into your Office 365 and SharePoint account. If you have MFA activated, it will then verify, okay, is that you, Kathleen? And you're like, no, I'm actually camping right now. Why would that be? What's happening? I'm not logging into my SharePoint account. Then you would take due diligence, going, something's going on. Someone's prompting my MFA into my SharePoint when I'm not even getting into SharePoint. So it allows you to be notified, so that if a threat actor is accessing a software, HR records, employee records, client records, vendor records, you have that MFA activated. It's just a trigger to say, are you actually accessing this? And when you look at it, you already use it with some accounts, because most software is trying to really push to make that mandatory. It takes, 5 seconds? So it doesn't take up a lot of time. A password manager doesn't take up a lot of time either. It takes a matter of a minute to be able to pick up your phone or have your browser help you with prompting it. So this isn't a lot of expertise. It's not a lot of time, and they're really user-friendly. So they're allowing you to be able to use these measures day to day throughout your whole day, but entering in these systems securely with authorized access and verifying that it's you, which is what we want to do. We want to be able to live in that world now where we're verifying it's, It's me getting into that system, no one else. And then we also have to have best practices around using Wi-Fi because some of us work remotely. Some of us travel while we work. And it's kind of fun to be able to travel and work, right? So when we look at that, we have to know, I'll just give you the quickest tip I can give you, and that is don't use Wi-Fi for any work. You could have a virtual private network, a VPN, but most companies don't have those. So if you're going to do confidential banking, look at client records, have to get an employee to sign off on a onboarding document, share personal information, do that before you go on that trip. And don't use Wi-Fi, or use your cellular hotspot, but don't log into hotel, airport, coffee shop ever when you're going to do work, because it's somewhat just an easy gateway for a criminal to be able to access your network, because Wi-Fi is just not secure. You could be sitting beside someone who has the software and tools to be able to access that Wi-Fi network and then pretend that they're Starbucks. I'm just going to say the word pretend because really they're using software to circumvent that to be able to be the Wi-Fi domain, and then you're logging into their network and then you're giving them all your information because you thought it was Starbucks. You would never know the difference ever. So because of that, you don't even want to necessarily put that at risk. You just don't do it unless you want to watch like YouTube videos, use Wi-Fi anytime. But anything confidential or work related, I would say avoid Wi-Fi at all cost. And then I would say, regardless of the methods that these criminals are using, I would say assume everything is fake and find a way to verify it. So if someone's going to call you and say, hey, can I get those records? Hey, can I get that report? Hey, can I get that staff payment information? Whatever it is, just best assume that it's not that person. And then go, hey, can I just call you back? I'll just get that information for you, but I'll call you back. Then go to your authorized form of communication and say, hey, Sally, did you call me? Did you actually want this record? Why are you calling me at 5 p.m? Or is this true? Is this what you need? And then you take that 2 minutes to verify, and then you can rest assured that that's actually the request. Because this is what's happening. We're being inundated with phone calls, and I'm sure you're already experiencing it. And it's so obvious which ones are fake, but I'm telling you, there's going to be a moment where you might not be able to determine it's fake. So if you can just operate under, I need to verify, and politely navigate an incoming email by going to the verified source first. If it's not verified, delete it. If it's verified, then you can respond. If it's not verified, you can also report it to your IT team to say, I think this is a scam or this is a malicious email. You will just have to have a different level of conversation with people, knowing that you're not doing anything wrong. You're doing everything right. It's just that they're trying to find ways to get you when you would least expect it and assume that it's not fake. So just have the conversation with your team members to be very open, and it's us against them now. So you're never going to be an expert, and you don't have to be. You're not going to know everything about these criminals' tactics. You don't have to. Just know, assume it's fake, and especially when you have that spidey sense, or you're just like, why are they asking of this now? Or, ooh, I feel weird. That's uncomfortable. I better hurry up and answer that. All of those are the prompts that they're using human psychology to trigger your response, and a quick response at that. And it may be hard to believe this is going to be happening, but if I could just emphasize, it's going to happen to you every day. And if you can be prepared for it, it won't be a surprise. Then you just go, oh, delete, 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 hang up, don't answer. And then you can be ready and on guard, and then not even be fazed by how come is this happening? I don't understand. It's beyond a how is this happening? Why is this happening to me? It's just it's about being ready. So some takeaways I would have for you is implement that password manager today, using that so you can clean up your passwords and protect yourself with your systems that you're logging into for your company's sake, for your sake, right? Protecting you, your family, and your organization. Protect your accounts, your critical accounts. If you don't have MFA activated, start that today. Turn those on. So easily is going into the settings, drop down menu into privacy and security, an enabling MFA. If your organization doesn't do it, have that at your next team meeting. Talk about how do we do this? Maybe this would be the first step we take. Be one of the easier steps. It would take a few months to activate, probably, but you still could get an organization as a whole moving in that direction. Again, 20 seconds to use an MFA enable on all of your software. So it's not time consuming or requiring expert for it, right? And then take those 5 seconds, 10 seconds to verify anything that's incoming. Is this real? Is this legitimate? How do I know? I'm going to go verify first through a source I know I can trust, not just because it's come to my inbox, not just because it came through text, not just because it came to my phone. Hackers have all that access too, so why do I know it's not them, right? Just assume that you don't have to obey any incoming requests. Your boss doesn't want you to do that. Your boss wants you to be digitally literate, wants you to be a critical thinker, and wants you to understand it's okay to take accountability and go, I don't know if this is real. I'm going to go ask my HR manager if this incoming request is real. They'll love you for it because they'll be like, thank you for taking that moment, because no one's losing any sleep over you taking 5 minutes to verify something's correct, but we will lose a lot of sleep if that is a malicious communication and they now infiltrated your whole networking system and software of your organization and shut you down, right? Again, it won't be your fault, but at the end of the day, it's because they're banking on you assuming it's not fake, right? So just, we used to have this whole like zero trust framework, and I want you to have that in your mentality. Just like when you answer your front door, when you have a knock on your front door, how many of you are a bit suspicious? You're like, I'm not expecting anyone. Who's there, right? Well, I would say when you're getting incoming requests that you're not asking for, you should be like, what are you asking me for? Why are you asking? And you can't negotiate with the incoming person requesting because they're going to sound polite. They're going to sound respectful. They're going to sound super professional. So they're going to sound convincing. They're going to completely plead with you on a level that meets you where you're at, right? Always. So, and at the end of it all, if you delete any of it, just delete it. That's the easiest out you have. Because think about it. If you're a bit panicky and you think, oh my gosh, I have to give this information, but you're like, why would they make me feel panicky? That's not my boss. That's not my colleague. That's not right. And you delete it. If it's really, truly something that's needed, they'll find another way to communicate with you. See, we forget that. We forget that actually those real humans that really work with you will find a way to actually really reach out to you and verify anyway, right? So no one's going to reach out to you in this panic method of hurry up, hurry up, hurry up. That's just not how you should operate. But it is because we are in a trusting world. We want to do best and right by our bosses and our colleagues and our team. And I'm not saying you can't and you shouldn't, but I'm saying you get to politely say, hey, just give me a second. I'll just double check for you. Let me call you back. Or I'll just don't respond to the email. I'm just going to go double check first. I'll come back to this. The text, I'm just going to go double check and come back first. But don't be tied into the curiosity, because that's how they'll tag you and hook you. So I've covered enough information to be able to give you some takeaways. I'd love to give a few minutes for you to be able to get some clarification